welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Judah Casey. Together we learn about biblical business principles, becoming who you're meant to be, and what being a light in the darkness looks like. You're listening to the Vision Pod. Okay, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Dave Meyers on. Thank you for coming on my podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's awesome to be here today.
No problem. Dave Meyers is a pastor at Royal Oak Victory Church. He's been at that church for 30 years, and now he's the vice president of Victory Churches Canada. And he was a teacher in my leadership fast track program for a couple courses. And yeah, when he taught, he just had a way about him that it made it easy to listen to, and then he had lots of good stuff to teach, and he knew his stuff.
Wow.
So how do you get into teaching?
Well, I guess, wow, let me think about that. After I got saved, which was quite a few years ago, I was 21 years of age, got involved with the church that gave my heart to Christ at. And, then went to Bible college for a couple years. And one thing led to another. And of course, you attend church, that's good. But, you don't want to just attend, you want to get involved in ministry. And so some of the areas of ministry I got involved with included teaching. So it would be small group settings.
Hmm.
It would also be leading youth and young adults. And so that's kind of where I began to hone my teaching gift at the beginning.
What are some ways that people can become better teachers? And would you say it's mostly knowing your stuff, or how can we be better teachers?
Well, that's a good question. And, the answer, some people might not like my answer, but it is biblical. Some people are endowed, that might be a good word, with the gift of teaching. So, you see it in Romans chapter 12. Paul talks about the different spiritual gifts that are given. Some have, gifts of mercy, some have gifts of giving, some have gifts of leadership, and he talks about people with gifts of teaching. And so I think that first of all, you want to find out what gifts you've been given by God. So the way I like to say it is nobody has, we all have something. God gives all of us certain gifts. Nobody has them all, but we all have something, some gifts. And so it's good to find out what gifts God has given you. If he's given you the gift of teaching, that's fantastic. Then you would want to lean into it, start doing it and honing the gift. And that would be improving your skill. So I think we've all maybe seen the show America's Got Talent, or Canada. And, it's kind of a funny show because sometimes they'll have people on the show who want to sing, but they can't sing, right? And for whatever reason, maybe their mother encouraged them or something, or said they're great. They go on the show thinking they can sing, and they can't sing at all. And so for someone like that, even if they took singing lessons, it's not going to help them. They need to find their gift, and for some of them, their gift isn't singing. They don't need to be encouraged. They need to be redirected. And in the same way with any spiritual gift, if you don't have the gift of teaching, or another name for it is communication, then you don't beat yourself up. It just means that God has another gift, different gifts for you. Now, if you do have the gift, then I think you want to lean in and really work on it and improve it. So I know that's a long answer to the question. And ways to improve it is by doing it. You can learn how to skate or ski in a classroom. You can learn all the theory, but really the way to master any of those is by doing it and improving. So, same thing with a teaching, preaching gift. If you have it, then you want to start doing it, but doing it with your eyes wide open, assessing yourself, having people assess you, and then, learning different ways, listening to other preachers, teachers, reading books, those kinds of things.
Hmm. Yeah, and so you're talking about Romans 12, and so would you say that you can only have like one of those spiritual gifts, or would you say that one is stronger than the other, or would you say that they all work together? How would you?
Well, we've done that spiritual gift. So there are tests that you can take, and I've used them for many years. And generally, what we focus on are the top three. So whenever you take a spiritual gift test, and there are some that are right out of Romans, um, you'll have three of your strongest gifts at the
Hmm.
top, and then of course, you'll look at three of your lowest gifts. And I think to look at your three strongest and really focus on those.
Hmm. Yeah. So when you're teaching in the fast track, your first course that you taught about was the spiritual disciplines, and
Mhm.
I thought it was a great course just to really like drive home the fact that we should be consistent with these kind of things. So why do you think they're so important in our walk, and why did you decide to teach that course?
Well, I guess it's been a personal journey for me. There's different names we can give them: spiritual disciplines, spiritual practices. Um, I know when I first got saved, and I got saved out of drug culture. I was a drug addict and never went to church, never heard the gospel, and I got powerfully saved. And a few months later, I ended up moving in with the youth pastor from my church. And I was staying in the basement of their house. He was married, he had a couple kids. And, it wasn't very long I'm there. I wake up one morning, I'm woken up one morning by this noise. And I look at the clock and it's like 5 in the morning. And I begin to listen, and I realize it's the youth pastor upstairs in the living room. I'm in the basement, and he's praying. And that was his habit, to get up 5 o'clock every morning, spend time praying. And he prayed out loud, of course, because I heard him, and he would read his Bible. And so, being a relatively a brand new Christian, I just thought that's what every Christian does. That's what you
Hmm.
do. You get up early in the morning and you pray and read the Bible, because that's the essence of growth. I really feel like, we the Holy Spirit, the grace of God is given to us, but there's things that we want to embrace to maximize transformation in our lives. And I think spiritual disciplines are those things.
Hmm.
And so that was the beginning of my journey. And I must say, I didn't master it overnight. Um, I'd set my alarm clock to 5 in the morning. It would go off. I'd um, reach over, press the snooze button, and then get up at 8. And then what I'd do is I'd move my alarm clock to the dresser where I had to
Right.
get up. And so then it would go off. I'd get up, press the snooze button, jump back into bed. And I mean, it got kind of ridiculous. I would put it down the hall, and yeah. And then this sounds really crazy. I actually bought a coffee pot that had a timer on it. And so what I would do is I'd set the timer to 4:30 on the coffee pot. The coffee would start making itself. The alarm clock would go off at 5. The aroma of the coffee, the noise of the alarm clock, it was down the hall, and that began to train me into getting up early so I could spend some time with God.
So have you
Yeah.
made that a habit of yours?
Yeah, so the way it works is it starts with desire. I want to know God more. I want to grow. I'd like to change in certain areas. So it starts with a desire. Then it turns into a discipline. In other words, you say, okay, I'm going to do this. By the grace of God, I'm going to do what I have to do to spend more time in prayer, more consistent time reading the Bible, and then it becomes delight. So it's desire, discipline, delight. In other words, you begin to crave it, and it becomes easier. So after a while, and it took a while, um, so where I'm at right now, I automatically I wake up at 5 in the morning. Like, I don't have to set my alarm clock or anything,
Mhm.
and I've been like that for years because my body's been trained. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that's the will of God for everybody, get up at 5 in the morning. Um, because, and I teach this in the course, is, God wants us to give our best time. And, sometimes for people, the best time is at night or it depends on their lifestyle. For me, the best time, I'm a morning person. That's when I'm present, I'm fresh, and that's my best time. And I think that's what we should be giving God is our best. So I'm not saying, the goal of all of us is to get up at 5 and pray and read the Bible, but the goal of all of us should be to have a time every day where we do nothing but get alone with God, spend time in prayer, and reading scripture, because that is the essence of transformation. That's how we know God and go deeper in our walk with Him.
Yeah, so what would you say, like, are the essential spiritual disciplines and the ones that you really highlight?
Yeah, so there's a lot of spiritual disciplines in scripture, and there's a lot that have been practiced through the centuries in the church. So, we have disciplines like fasting and disciplines like frugality. Frugality is living with less money, living a simpler life. There's disciplines of solitude, and there's quite a list. There's actually, you could break them into two categories: of things I embrace, disciplines I embrace, like prayer, Bible reading. Um, Gratitude is a discipline, and then there's disciplines I let go of. So things like fasting and abstinence, things that you release. Uh, and so there's quite a few of them, but I think the top three for me, maybe four, are prayer, and they all sort of mingle together. But prayer, solitude, Bible reading, and I would even throw journaling into that,
Hmm,
where we meditate and journal, write down our thoughts about what we're getting through prayer and in the Word. I think those are the big four,
hmm.
the biggest ones. Those for me would be the essentials.
Do you find that you create some of your sermons through the journaling you do in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely. So now, I do coach and teach pastors quite a bit,
Hmm,
and I'm a bit of a stickler for this because I call it minister's disease. So, the way I share it is every occupation has what they call occupational hazards. And so, for instance, if you're a roofer, one of the occupational hazards of being a roofer is you could fall off the roof. If you're a fireman, you could get trapped in a burning building.
mhm,
If you're in the ministry, if you're a pastor and you're preaching all the time, one of your occupational hazards is reading the Bible, not for yourself, but to get a sermon.
hmm,
And that is an occupational hazard, because what happens is when we as leaders, pastors, begin to read the Bible that way, it's all about what I'll say to my congregation rather than what God is
right.
saying to me. And when we get to that place, that's a dangerous place. So, sometimes we'll hear about these ministers that are, fall into sin and the scandals. And I mean, this last years, there's been a lot of them. And you wonder, well, how could that ever happen? Well, I think one of the reasons is these ministers, these pastors get to a place where they're so focused on ministry out there to the people out there that they're no longer preaching the gospel to themselves. Uh, so when I do my personal devotions, and devotions consists of prayer, Bible reading, and meditation, along with journaling, I'm I'm looking for what God is saying to me.
Hmm.
Now, that being said, sometimes out of those moments, sermons come out of that. But that's never my motivation for doing it, um, because that's the cart before the horse. It's kind of a dangerous place to get to.
Hmm. For your spiritual discipline of prayer, what do you think makes prayer so important?
Well, some people, they approach prayer sort of like a grocery list, like I need to ask God for stuff. So I need stuff from God. And we do need stuff from God. Jesus said, He said, ask and it shall be given. Knock and the door shall be opened. So He does encourage us to ask, but prayer is far more than just trying to get stuff from God. Prayer is really our opportunity to get intimate with Him and get to know Him and to hear from Him. And and so that's really the main motivation for prayer. It's like what David said, this one thing, I'll do. I want to know you, Lord. And it's like Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus. So I think that's one of the reasons you go into prayer, the main motivation. I want to know God more. I want to sense His presence. I want to hear from Him. And then, of course, I mean, He does encourage us to pray and ask for things and intercession and pray for people. And so so that's why prayer is so key. Um, it keeps us connected.
Hmm. Yeah, grounds us.
Yeah.
Hmm. Why do you think that lots of Christians don't have these spiritual disciplines in their daily lives?
Well, it's a great question. I know I've gone through many battles with it. I think a lot of Christians want it, right? It starts with the desire. So so maybe what they'll do is they'll go to church, they'll hear a great sermon on the importance of reading the Bible or becoming a person of prayer. Maybe it's like New Year's and they're wanting to make some New Year's resolutions and they say, "Wow, I'm going to become more active in these areas than I ever have before." But the problem is the desire's there, but the discipline isn't. And so they might try it for a couple times, or they might be doing well for a little while, but then the wheels fall off. And so there are some things that I think we can implement in our lives that will help us become more consistent,
Hmm. Yeah, so
so that we turn desire into discipline, into delight, that where we're really getting the motivation and we're really getting the fulfillment out of it.
hmm. Yeah, so how can we stay more consistent?
Well, I think it comes down to, for me, and I teach this wherever I go, but I think the first thing is you need to pick a time where you will do nothing but do your devotions. And when I say devotions, it consists of maybe some time in praise and worship, listening to worship music. It's solitude, the discipline of getting alone with God. It's reading the Bible. It's praying. Those clusters of spiritual disciplines. That's devotion to me. So you pick a time where that's all you do. And I always say, pick a time and don't change the time. So some people say, well, what's the best time? because the Bible talks about, David says, I'll seek God early in the morning. So some people say, wow, that's what I got to do. I got to be like Pastor Dave, get up at 5 in the morning and seek God. But David also said in the Psalms, I'm going to seek God at night. So they're both there. So I say my principle is pick the best time. And the best time is when you're at your best. And so some people are by nature morning people. Um, they're at their best in the morning. Some people, by their nature, are night people. We call them night owls. And at 9 o'clock at night, boy, their eyes are wide open, and they're full of life. And so maybe for them, their devotional time is in the evening. And so what I say is pick the time, morning, noon, night, and once you pick it, don't change it. Because the minute you start changing your devotional time, you'll find all these excuses why you'll do it later. So you pick it and you keep the time. Jesus said in Matthew 6, he said, when you pray. So I always say the way to develop a strong prayer devotional life is pick the when and don't change the when.
Hmm. So recently, you have kind of transitioned out of being lead pastor at your church, and you kind
Mhm.
of passed the torch, and then you've kind of moved on. So what was that transition like, and how is it like transitioning leaders and knowing that this leader is gonna take the church to the next level?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Now, as far as the first question, what is it like now? It's so new because we handed our church off to Pastor Dan Goddard 3 weeks ago, and then we went on a couple weeks holiday. And so my first Sunday back was this past Sunday. It was the first Sunday in my church uh, in 29 years where I wasn't I'm not the senior pastor, so it's a little fresh right now.
Hmm.
Um, but we've been thinking about it for quite a while. So this isn't something that just came out of the blue. We've been planning it, I would say, for a couple years
Hmm.
and looking at who would be best to replace us. We talked to our board about it, to the staff, and just waiting for things to line up.
Hmm. So how did you know that Dan was gonna be the person to take the responsibility?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to look at there's a variety of things that come into place. One of them is relationship. When I took the church, and the church that we pastored at, we took it over from Dr. George and Hazel Hill. They pastored it for 6 years. And after 6 years, my wife and I came and we took the church. When we took the church, Pastor Dan was a youth pastor. And so he was on staff, and we worked together, him and I, for 14 years.
Hmm.
Uh, and then, so we had a great relationship, and he
Hmm.
went from youth pastor to associate to where at the end we were pretty much pastoring the church together. He was probably doing a third of the preaching. We would plan the preaching schedule together, pretty much pastoring together. And then he felt that God was calling him to Moose Jaw, so he went there and was there for 16 years.
Hmm.
I always felt that he would be coming back, and so he was always in my mind as far as someone who could take the church. So the relationship was there. But not only that, I mean, he did fantastic. The giftings were there.
Hmm.
Uh, so he went to Moose Jaw, and the church grew to 800 people, which says a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. Became right now, I think it's the largest church in Moose Jaw. So, our church is 1,000 people.
Mm,
So I can't just hand the church off to somebody who, is maybe pastored a church of 100, or I
right.
need somebody who can lead a church that's larger. So we had the relationship. Danny had the skills and the experience, and then I think the chemistry was a good fit.
Hmm,
He knows the heart of our church, the culture, and he would be a good replacement because he was part of us. Even the church in Moose Jaw, he patterned a lot of what he was doing after what uh,
okay.
we were doing here in Calgary. So I guess those were the three main things,
Hmm,
and then opportunity, right?
mhm,
Is he willing to come? And then, of course, can he come? Because, of course, to leave his church and come here, he has to find someone to take the church in Moose Jaw. So, this was a 2-year plan that we started, and as I said, sometimes it seemed like it was going down the track fairly well, and then the wheels would fall off. But at the end of the day, after the 2-year mark, it seemed to all come together. And Pastor Dan came, he moved to Calgary in July, and we handed the church off to him in January.
hmm. So you have been on quite a few missions trips, especially to Asia. I know you're friends with Pastor Al, who I also interviewed here. What do you like about going on missions trips?
Well, that's a great question. I just came back from India. I was in India in November, and we did two big conferences, one in New Delhi and one in southern India. Um, I went with Pastor Terry, who's the president of Victory Churches of Canada. We spoke. The conferences were with leaders and pastors and leaders. That's who was there. And I don't know, there's a lot of things I like about missions. One thing is the hunger. Um, you don't, sometimes, you don't sometimes we don't realize that we as North Americans are a little bit apathetic. And, you know, the hunger for teaching, for growing, sometimes is a little less in North America. But when you go to the mission field, there, there's a great passion there to learn and grow. So that's one thing I really appreciate.
Hmm, yeah. So the first time I saw you in person was when you were at our church, and prior to you preaching, then you were preaching about marriage because there was a marriage conference going on. So what I want to ask you, what are some ways that you kept your marriage strong over the years?
Wow, well, that's a great question. We've been married. We'll be celebrating our 40th anniversary in May, and I don't know. There's a whole lot to unpack there. I think the main thing is that before we got married, we really prayed and to find the will of God. And so I always say there's two big decisions you'll make in life. The first one, the biggest one, is what will I do with Jesus?
Mhm,
And the second one is who will I marry? Because that can either greatly enhance your life or it can make your life really challenging. And I think we've all seen that. And so for my wife and I, we were both believers. We were passionately serving the Lord in the church that we were attending. She was involved in the young adults ministry. I was the young adult leader, and so we did ministry together, and that's how we first met. And then one thing led to another. We became friends, and then from there, friends turned into, I guess, more than friends. I began to see her in a different light, and that's when we ended up going out and and dating for a season, and then of course it went from there to engagement to marriage. But one thing we did do when we were in the dating season of our life is we really sought God's will about whether we should be spending the rest of our lives together.
Hmm.
And so I know this sounds crazy, but we both went on a 10-day fast.
Hmm.
And I know for some that might seem a bit odd, but we fasted from ourselves. In other words, we didn't see each other for 10 whole days, but we fasted from food and we sought the Lord because we really wanted to hear from heaven. And after the fast, we came together and we kind of shared what we felt the Lord was saying. And it was a green light for both of us.
Hmm.
And it was after that that we got engaged. Now, the reason why that's so important for me is because every marriage is going to have its ups and downs. And you're going to, as a married couple, you're going to go into some real storms, which happened to us, of course. But in the storms, you settle. What grounds you in the storms is you say, well, no, you know, um, I'm mad right now. We're having a tough time right now, but I know I heard from heaven, and I know that she's the one. And she would say, I know that he's the one. He's acting like a jerk right now, but I know he's the one because God told me. And then you're able to navigate through that and work on things and get better so that the storms are less intense and don't last as long.
Hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, this is gonna be a great episode. My podcast goes out to a whole bunch of different people, mostly under like 45, and then some young men and business people. So, do you have anything to say before we go? Anything?
Well, I think this whole area of marriage is key. I do know that young people nowadays meet one another in different ways. And I know there's online, and that's fine. But I would say that I would encourage young adults to really lean into the Lord, find out what God's will is for their lives in the area of relationships. Uh, Online dating is fine; it's a tool, but you really want to be picky and you want to hear from heaven, and it's a huge decision, and you really want to do it right. And right would be uh, reserving intimacy till after marriage and honoring God in your relationship. So that's one thing. Um, I guess for all of us, I think we're entering into some interesting times. I uh, I think the times are going to get a little more chaotic. I really believe that. I think that the world is going to become more um, unpredictable, and that along with that, though, there's going to be some fantastic opportunities, and we need to watch for those. And so, even going into this new year, and I'm not overly prophetic, my wife would be more than me, but while I was in prayer, what the Lord showed me was these pools, um, kind of little reservoirs, and they were reservoirs of grace. And and he told me that this coming year and maybe the next, there's going to be a lot of chaos, uncertainty, but we're going to be able to walk through it. And as we walk, there's going to be these pools of grace
Hmm.
that he wants to lead us to. And in those pools, we will find strength, favor, blessing, increase, all the good things of God. So for me, I think going into this new year, we need things like number one, we need discernment. We
Hmm.
really need to see what's going on both the bad and the good. I mean, there's going to be pools, reservoirs that God will lead us to, but we need to see those. So this is why praying every day and being close to God is so important. He's got these reservoirs that he wants us to drink from. And but then, so discernment is the biggest thing. The second thing would be courage to step into them, because not all of them are going to at first look wonderful. And so to just see it, have the courage to step into it. Thirdly, tenacity to stay with it, because it's not all going to be fun and games. Um, and and then I think if we can practice those three things: discernment, courage, and tenacity, the other side of that is fruitfulness. Um,
Hmm.
and so, I think for us as Christians, it's a chaotic time, but it's going to be a fantastic time because of these pools of opportunity that God is going to bring us to.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so we don't want to live in fear. We want to live in faith and great expectation, but we have to really stay close to God
Hmm.
through it all.
Hmm. Well, thank you for coming on my podcast, and thank you for everything that you
Yeah.
shared.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I just want to commend you for your ministry and what you're doing, and I think it's fantastic. So keep up the great ministry, God, and I just pray God uses this to multiply and touch a lot of hearts and lives.
Amen.